Hello, my dear folks, my dear audiences. Welcome to the show. Jack Xiao, my East West with G&E TV. Well, we are so happy, and people are getting happier than yesterday, looking at the China-U.S. relationship. U.S.-China relationship is really the core relationship of the world of peace. As long as China and the United States are shaking hands, you are expected to see a peaceful world. Other than that, no. I don't think so, because they are the major powers, you so-called superpowers, if you will, of the world. Now, speaking of U.S.-China relationship, all the credit goes to last century, two great men of the world, Mao Zedong and Nixon, President Nixon. Prior to President Nixon, who visited China in 1972 to break the ice, there was a go-between, a great go-between. Who is the go-between? He is Dr. Henry Kissinger. Dr. Henry Kissinger sensed about the world future, short-term, mid-term, and long-term future during the early days of the 70s, which is about the mid-time of the Cold War, that the solution to the world peace is between China and the United States. So sensing that, he made the first approach to test water in China, so that he built up as a foundation for the first visit ever in history of President of the United States, President Nixon, Richard Nixon, to China, where he saw Mao Zedong as president of China at that time. Of course, in between Zhou Enlai and the time. And of course, on Nixon's team, there's lots of important people. Now, Dr. Henry Kissinger is still in good health, and it is the special honor for EDI that he met with President Mr. James Su of EDI a day ago, talking about U.S.-China relationship. So in this segment, we'll bring you the recording of the conversation and the interview. Probably that will refresh you about where the credit goes, speaking of U.S.-China relationship, which is the foundation of the world peace, which is working, which is now at work. So,
New York Times reviewer said that world order is a book that every member of Congress should be locked in a room with, forced to read before taking the oath of office. Don't let the tantalizing title of the provocative jacket artist. This is a very exciting book. It's as timely as tomorrow's headlines. It's wise and sophisticated, but it's completely accessible to the interested layman. Some of the chapters, like those dealing with China and Russia and Islam and America, are masterpieces of synthesis and analysis. And the final chapter on the internet, or on technology, and particularly the impact of the internet on our world today, should be required reading. Matter of fact, I would change the Times reviewer's criterion and say that every American should be locked in a room with a copy of World Order and forced to, at the very least, read that final chapter about the internet before the next time they go online. We'll talk about World Order shortly, but I thought I would divide our very limited time into thirds. And since we're in Yorba Linda, in the East Room at the Nixon Library, I thought I would ask you some questions about Richard Nixon and your relationship with him, and then move on to world order. And then if there's any time left, perhaps ask some questions about the application of the principles of world order to the very real problems we're facing today all around the world, from Ebola to ISIS. So, to begin with Nixon, how did Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger become the 20th century's diplomatic, dynamic duo? The Vice President Nixon wrote you a fan letter in 1958 when your sensational book, Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy, was published. And Claire Boothe arranged a brief meeting with you at her apartment in New York. But the next and second time you meet him is in the Pierre Hotel when he is president-elect, and he offers you, or he appears to think he offers you, the position as his national security advisor. What do you remember of that meeting?
If anyone had predicted to me or anyone, say, at the beginning of 68, that at the end of 68, I would have been appointed National Security Advisor to Richard Nixon, they would have been considered mad. I had met him, as pointed out, Frank, for 10 seconds at a Christmas party in Claire Boothe house. He was coming in and I was going out. He had written me a very friendly letter in 58 about my book, Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy. And I guess I answered it politely, and I'm sure I answered it politely. But for most of that period, from 58 to 68, I was the foreign policy advisor of Nelson Rockefeller, who contested the nomination. He was a competitor for the nomination in 3 times. And so when I was invited to meet with Nixon, he sort of reviewed the international situation with me. And one of the essences of Richard Nixon was that he was very diffident in his personal relationships, and that he wanted to avoid situations in which he might be rejected. So by the end of that first meeting, I knew he wanted something, but I didn't know what. So I went back to Harvard, and a week later, John Mitchell called me up and said, "Well, are you going to take the job or not?" And I said, "What job?" And Mitchell said, "Oh my God, he screwed it up." So I was called back. This time he offered me the job. And this is no credit to me, but I was an arrogant Harvard professor. So I said, "I've been opposing you, and I've been on the other side for the last 10 years. I'd like to think about it." He should have told me to get lost at that point. He said, "Take a week." And the person who saved the situation was Nelson Rockefeller, who, when I told him about it the next day, said, "Has it ever occurred to you that Nixon is taking a bigger risk on you than you on him?" So that's true. So from this, it's an unpromising beginning, unlikely beginning. From the first day that I walked into the office, Nixon didn't treat me as being on trial, he treated me as his chief advisor. And the essence of Nixon, the quality of Nixon foreign policy was that he was a very reflective man. He would sit he had a little hideaway, or not a little, but he had a hideaway office in the executive office building in the State Department, the old State Department building. And he'd sit there for hours with yellow pads, having read books or memos and thinking through the issues. And what he liked to do is to get me in and discuss understands how to think about these things. But at the same time, he had a great capacity to make important decisions. And I would say over those years, I think back of them to that with enormous pride. And in the book that Frank Adams was kind enough to mention, I devote part. I go through various pressures